Judy Woodruff has covered politics and other news for 5 decades at PBS, CNN, and NBC. She is now a senior correspondent and the former anchor and managing editor of the PBS News Hour. She has also served as the PBS chief Washington correspondent for the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour and anchored the award-winning documentary series Frontline with Judy Woodruff. In 2013, she and the late Gwen Ifill were named the first two women to co-anchor a national news broadcast. At CNN, Judy was a senior correspondent and anchored the weekday program Inside Politics. At NBC News, she was a White House correspondent for 5 years and served as NBC's Today Show chief Washington correspondent. In 2006, she was a visiting professor at Duke University's Terry Sanford Institute of Public Policy. In 2005, she was a visiting fellow at Harvard University's Joan Shorenstein Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy. Judy is a founding co-chair of the International Women's Media Foundation, an organization dedicated to promoting and encouraging women in journalism and communication industries worldwide. She has received many awards, including an Emmy Lifetime Achievement Award, the Gwen Ifill Press Freedom Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism from Arizona State University. Judy Woodruff is the recipient of Moment's 2025 Robert S. Greenberger Journalism Award. Joining Judy today is Moment special contributor Robert Siegel, former senior host of PBS's All Things Considered. Please welcome Judy Woodruff and Robert Siegel.
Judy Woodruff, welcome and congratulations on winning the Robert S. Greenberger Journalism Award this year.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. It means so much to me because, of course, I knew Bob Greenberger and know his family, and it's just a special personal honor for me, and very much unexpected, I'll say. So, but
well, very much deserved. You've done a lot of reporting recently on divisions in American life, and also on efforts to bridge those divisions. Does this work leave you concerned that our democracy is at risk with all these divisions, or that it's rock solid?
Well, it has to be the former, because yes, we are the most divided I've seen the country since I started covering politics more than 50 years ago. And I have seen, traveling around the country, that many Americans feel confident about the state of our democracy, but others are concerned, and they see it playing out in the form of division that is more personal and more full of animus than anything we've seen and that they've seen, and that gives them and me concern that about how we're going to resolve this and how we're going to come together when we have such dark feelings about those of us who are wherever we live, whether we're on the East Coast, the middle of the country, or the West Coast. We have some pretty harsh feelings about people on the other side, and that's what has me concerned.
Yeah, we passed a strange milestone several years ago when more people were okay with their child marrying someone of another faith than they were marrying someone of another political party.
For sure. And we, in fact, talked to, I remember one of the interviews I did in 2024 was with a family in Colorado where the husband and wife were of different parties. And they talked to us about how they made it work. They used a lot of humor, but they talked about it was work. And as I'm sure you know, there are fewer and fewer of those marriages in the country. Fewer and fewer people are dating, marrying people in the other party. And what you just said about parents is what we've seen play out as well.
Well, what role does American journalism, or more generally American media, what role do they play in either dividing us or potentially bringing us together?
Well, I think we have a role to play across the board, and the one that I think is the most concerning is is right now the role the larger media is playing. And I realize when we say media, and you know this very well,
Mhm.
we're talking about a whole lot of different formats, everything from what somebody created as either a TikTok platform or a blog, or all the way to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, the News Hour on PBS, and everything in between. So there's the word media can mean a whole lot of different things. Having said that, right now, it's clear to me that so much of the media, whether it's cable television, the internet, social media, certainly Facebook, and you could go on, Instagram, is exacerbating tensions. And how is that? It's because we are drawn to conflict, and I think we too often play up conflict. You are more likely to see argument on you turn on one of the cable channels, and you're more likely to see argument playing out than you are to see a discussion about a policy difference and how do we find common ground. Compromise has become a dirty word in American politics, and you don't see a whole lot. It doesn't make great theater,
Mhm.
and we don't cover it very well. On the other hand, you asked about what role do we have to play in bringing us together. I would like to think in a very small way, the work I've been doing for the News Hour over the last 3.5 years, highlighting our differences, and then this year, especially talking to people about how do we come together, can play a small role in bringing us together. But we got some big mountains to climb before we get there.
It seems one of the problems in discussing this situation is that there is a dimension by which you can say what we're witnessing is the democratization of access to mass media. That it used to be, people would say, "Oh, freedom of the press means freedom for people who own a press," and that was a fairly limited group. Today, everyone's a potential publisher of his or her ideas, no matter how strange or untested they may be. Well, one doesn't go through the normal, well, past the typical gatekeepers who used to be there before one had access to large audiences. So it feels as though there's some strength behind this phenomenon that we're so disappointed in. But it is a kind of democracy at work, alas.
Alas,
Yeah.
it is, and you're right, Robert. There's no question that the fact that people can, more people, in fact, everybody, if they have access to a smartphone, they can weigh in. They can put their opinion on X, formerly Twitter. They can weigh in on Instagram. They can fire off TikTok messages. And I'm sure there are plenty of other platforms that I'm not even aware of out there.
Right.
And there will be more in the future. We know that
Mhm.
one thing's for sure. We keep inventing a new one every day. So it does allow people to be engaged themselves and to weigh in. All that, I think there's so much to the good
Mhm.
in that. I love the idea that people can weigh in and express their opinion. The problem is, as you just put your finger on it, is that it's blurred the lines between what is reporting that's been vetted, that's been checked out, that's been checked for accuracy, and just somebody putting their opinion out there. And so it's harder and harder for Americans to tell the difference. Whenever I'm out speaking to groups of people around the country, um, I get this question all the time from young people, from college students, high school students, and certainly from older folks, my generation. How do I know what information I can trust? How do I know
Mhm.
what to believe?
Mhm.
And this is something that is a phenomenon of our wonderfully technologically advanced world with all sorts of platforms, but it's also a problem, and it's a problem that we are all going to be dealing with, and our children and our grandchildren, and let's hope there's somebody's going to come up with a way to deal with it. But it does place a greater burden on news consumers and information consumers, because if you want to know what to believe, what you can trust, you've got to do more work.
I want to make sure that we understand what what the actual divisions are, since most of us live in one camp or another, and we manage to spend our lives with lots of people who agree with us about many things. America has been divided in my lifetime over abortion, very deeply divided over Vietnam, over desegregation. Before that, it was divided over temperance and prohibition. It was divided, the big one, over slavery. So we've always had divisions. You're not we can't really aspire to a politics in which we don't differ about important things.
Absolutely right. And that's what makes our democracy great, that we can have these debates and
Mm.
that we have them and we go through them and we don't always resolve them, but we keep going. The difference to me today is the fact that people have such hard views about people on the other side, that there's become a level of contempt that's built in for people. If you're on the left, and this is just an example, you think people on the other side are, quote, ignorant or are not, don't care about the democracy that we cherish, that they're, as I said, ignorant, ill-informed. In some instances, the charge is they're racist because they have different views about immigration, about uh, affirmative action, so-called DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. On the other hand, on the right, there's the view that the left is closed-minded, elite, has its head in the clouds, looks down on people who don't have a lot of education,
Mhm.
are dumb. And so, and those views have hardened to the point that you see name calling that just,
Mhm.
you see it everywhere. You see it
Yeah.
on online, social media, television. Our discourse is much coarser
Mhm.
than it was, and this is the thing that concerns me. And I know I'm not a historian, but I have read historians and interviewed some who say, that, well, there's a reason to worry because this is the kind of thing that happened in the decades leading up to the Civil War. Well, none of us wants to think that
Yeah.
we're headed for another Civil War, but it is a worrying time. And to me, that's the great distinction. It's not that we've haven't disagreed. We have. It's the way we're disagreeing now.
Well, here's a real life problem that a newsroom might face, and I just wanted to tease out its implications with you. Um, uh, there is some story about vaccinations, and we are divided over vaccinations. It's not an equal division, but there are Americans who uh, believe, as was traditional and I think unchallenged until fairly recently, that mandatory vaccinations are a justified public health measure, and there are people like me, of one-time polio pioneer as a first grader when we tested the Salk vaccine, who remember the fear that our parents used to have before polio was prevented with the vaccine, and that has been an unchallenged verity that there's validity to vaccination, and it's a reasonable sacrifice to ask of people that they take a vaccine. Or it's an infringement upon our liberties. People who have read about alternative theories of what vaccines might do not agree with the what had been fairly broadly held consensus. Uh, is the newsroom obliged somehow to honor both of these viewpoints when one has a couple of centuries of history behind it, I guess, since smallpox was eradicated, and the other is marred with a notorious fraudulent British medical journal article about autism and vaccinations. Uh, However flawed those ideas may be, they have a friend in the cabinet running the relevant agency, and vaccine skeptics enjoy some political clout. How do you parse that dilemma that the journalist has in dealing with this division?
you report both. Certainly you report the preponderance of science, medical research that's out there going back decades that upholds the value and the success rate of vaccines and keeping people alive and keeping people healthy. You report that. You also report that there are those, a smaller group, who believe this, and you document, you report what it is that they base it on. And I think by the very reporting of it, you show, again, the preponderance of evidence, medical research, historical, the statistics are that vaccinations are by and large safe. Yes, there are some exceptions. There are people who've had allergic reactions, and there's still research going on. Nothing is ever final in this field because they're always discovering new medications. But you report it and you put it in context, and you say in the reporting you lay out this is what has been followed in the medical community for decades, and this is what it's achieved. And then, as I say, on the other hand, this is what some people, and you report on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and where he says he gets his information from, but you make sure the audience knows that there is a difference in the sourcing and in the background that each side is relying on, because there is a difference, and you share that with the audience.
But do we run the risk in trying to be fair and to treat our readers or listeners or viewers with dignity, whatever their views? Do we run the risk of promoting people just because we have to have somebody on board who represents that attitude? It may be somebody with minimal credentials, and just by acknowledging the argument, do we risk lending credibility to something that I feel I'm not being an elitist by saying that I think vaccinations generally have been a great success, and we risk calling everything an opinion, whether it's one supported by a great deal of science or one opposed by a great deal of science.
I think again, my view is that when you report that vaccinations have been by and large, for the vast majority of the time we've been using vaccines, whether it's smallpox, polio, the vaccines that we give children, and today COVID, that by and large, they have been safe, and they have saved lives and made people healthier. And then you compare that to the evidence that is relied on by people today who are saying, having a different view. I think it comes across in the reporting, in the statement of it, what the difference is, that how little support there is for the other point of view. But I don't think, Robert, you can ignore it, because President Trump does have, as his Secretary of Health and Human Services, a very powerful role in government, someone who believes that. And I think the public needs to understand what is being said by the vaccine skeptics and what they are basing it on. For example, I just watched a documentary on Frontline on PBS this past week, where they spent, I think it was 2 hours, looking at Robert F. Kennedy's background and how he came to be someone who, later in life, who adopted this idea that vaccines play some role in autism and various other views that he has. You see in that documentary what he bases it on, and it's thin compared to the great preponderance of evidence on the other side.
Something happened earlier this year between President Trump and two networks that reminded me of a famous story of a Arthur Ochs Sulzberger, the New York Times publisher, going to the White House in 1963. Mr. Sulzberger's Saigon correspondent was David Halberstam, a reporter who famously crumpled up a release from a news briefing and threw it back at the briefer, said, "This is, these are all lies." President Kennedy was supposed to have, is reported to have said to Mr. Sulzberger, "I think it's time really to reassign Mr. Halberstam. It's his usefulness in Saigon is really at an end." And Sulzberger is said to have replied, "Mr. President, you run the country, and I'll run Times assignments." And they stood by their man. I think that's what every journalist would like to think, that the publisher, the executive editor, the news director, whoever it is, the vice president of news, whoever leads the organization they work for, that's what they'd like to think their boss would say when put under some pressure over their reporting. Instead, we had the president raising some what people familiar with defamation law thought was some pretty flimsy cases against CBS and ABC, and those companies complied rather quickly, making multi-million-dollar payments to the president as an individual, in effect selling out the people who had done the work that was under challenge. What do you make of? And I shouldn't say that heads of media organizations stand out. Unfortunately, there were heads of universities and law firms who came under similar pressure, and many acceded to it. And I wonder what you think about the ease with which Mr. Trump challenged what we thought were powerful institutions and walked right over them.
I think it says everything about what's happened to the news business, to journalism, that so many news organizations, particularly in television, that's what you were citing, ABC and CBS, are now not run by journalists. And in the past, there have been, I guess you could say, business people running them, but business people who believed in the importance of the role of journalism. And they took great pride in the journalist part of their portfolio, if you will. I think of Bill Paley at CBS, William Paley, and others over the years at ABC and the other networks. Today, it's much more, we know these companies have been swallowed up by bigger companies that may or may not be even in the media business, much less in the business of journalism. And they're making decisions based on business, based on profits and loss, what's going to help my business. And journalism as a concern has been pushed to the side. I don't want to think it's gone away altogether, but when you have the fact, and we've known this for a long time. I remember, we've known I'll just put it this way, we've known for a long time, for decades, that any news organization, when the news comes up against commercial interests, there's often been a tug of war. Edward R. Murrow bumped into that when he was at CBS in the 1960s. So it's been there, and I think maybe we should say we're lucky that it hasn't been any worse than it is. It's just that right now we are in a particularly tough moment for journalism because the business model has collapsed thanks to technology. As you know, we've lost, 3,300 newspapers in the last 2 decades. I'm keeping track of that. Local media is collapsing. And we have television news organizations that are being bought and sold right and left. And so it's a difficult time. And I worry a lot about where we're headed. I hope there are going to be more examples of courage than there are of capitulation. But we are in a difficult moment, and I hope the public is paying close attention.
Of course, I remember reading in the history of the Times of the New York Times, that is, that the Ox, Adolph Ox, the fellow who bought the New York Times, I guess, had really found in Chattanooga, where he was running a paper, in a border state, that it was good for business to be neutral between Republicans and Democrats and pro-slavery and anti-slavery people, because the market he was serving was very greatly divided. And I'm wondering, the implication is that well, we are very divided about many things. Do we think now it's better business to take a partisan position and argue it and be opinionated, or is there still a market there in trying to be a mediator of conflicting ideas?
Well, I certainly hope it's the latter, because even though I work in public media and we're
Hmm.
not commercially owned and run, that's our mantra. It's all about reporting, and it's about not taking sides. It's about presenting sides as they exist, but also putting them, adding a whole lot of facts and information and evidence and background so that people can see what the news is based on, and that it wasn't just something that we woke up in the morning and decided, okay, we're going to tell you this. We just made it up. No, that it's based on uh, reporting, it's based on evidence. There's something solid to back it up. Um, I hang my hat on that, Robert. I mean, that's the kind of
Hmm.
journalism I learned. I didn't go to
Hmm.
journalism school. I didn't study journalism at all. I learned it on the job. And my first producer said to me, this is covering politics in Atlanta, and the Georgia state legislature. He said, just remember, Judy, you're here just to go out and report the facts. You know, you go out, you take notes, you write your stories, and we come back and we'll get it on the air. Nobody gives a damn what Judy Woodruff thinks.
Hmm.
And I took that to heart. And that's a pretty simplistic way of putting it, but I've always believed that. Do I think that there is a role for opinion? Sure. I mean, absolutely. My husband was for years an opinion columnist at the Wall Street Journal.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was labeled as opinion. It was on the editorial page, op-ed page. Today, he writes opinion columns to this day. And so, and I know a lot of columnists, but but do I think that we can survive as a country if we don't have straight reporting anymore? No. If we don't have the Associated Press and the New York Times and the News Hour and NPR and the other news organizations that are in this to spread the facts. Uh, that's what really worries me. I welcome the opinion, but the opinion needs to be based on facts.
Yeah. You mentioned the loss of all of those local newspapers and the damage that local media have sustained, the losses they've sustained in business. I once heard I can't remember the exact number, but if you don't live in one of the largest cities in America, it's most likely that the only locally owned news media in your, I have to say city, but of course everyone would say market, would be the public stations. They're licensed either to a local community group or to a local university branch, and they're part of that community. I wonder if you could describe what the loss of so much locally owned media has meant for people who live in cities that aren't as big as New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco.
And I will say, as a preface, that some of these large cities they've certainly lost the bulk
Yeah.
of the news reporting. I mean, I think of cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver, Chicago,
Mhm.
where they've had to um, reshape, rethink. And I think of city after city across the country that has lost the great morning newspaper. In some cases, they had two newspapers. I think of Denver, I think of Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta this week or next, Atlanta in coming weeks will lose its newspaper, the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, altogether. It's going totally digital. They'll still have access, but it'll be different. So even big cities are affected by this. But to your question, it is the case that in small cities across this country, small towns, communities that are more rural, the public radio station, public television are their only sources of straight news. It's just not available. Yes, they will probably have access to the television commercial networks, the over-the-air networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and they're still reporting news. They put it on in the morning and in the evening. But when it comes to reporting in depth, and in putting news on in more than a minute or two, we Americans have to rely in so many places on public media, and this most recent defunding of public media, radio and television, on the part of the Trump administration and then adopted by Congress, does mean that stations are closing, stations are downsizing, programs are being cut, reporters are being laid off. And we are we're in a hard and challenging time. We are trying to make up for that with asking our viewers, our followers, our listeners to support us. And thankfully, many are stepping up, but it's very difficult to make up the big cut that took place this year.
I want to talk about something that is oddly, you've alluded to it, but it's something that I don't hear discussed much. Coarsening. You talked about the coarsening of our discourse. You reminded me when you quoted your first news director as telling you they don't give a damn what you think. That's our most lurid and profane moment of this discussion. We're in a medium right now. We're talking in a medium online where the hallmark of it is a level of language which, to be polite, is informal. It's profane. It's obscene. It's all opinions are expressed with umpteen f-bombs attached to them as you tune in. And this, to me, I've been trying to understand what the significance of this is, and it seems to me that it is it's a symptom of something that we prize greatly, which is authenticity. We seem to be attracted as a people to that which is genuine and not dressed up in civilities. I remember a Trump supporter in New Hampshire during his first run, whom I remember interviewing, his view, he expressed his frustration with people on C-SPAN, meaning members of Congress, who would talk about the gentleman this and the gentle lady that. And so he just wished someone would go up and punch the other guy in the nose. There seems to be something propelling us as a people toward writing more informally than we used to, toward speaking more informally than we used to. And we've now reached a point of where commentators speak the way they might in a bar, or in my experience, when they were 12-year-old boys. People who in the past would have presented their ideas in a language that was meant not to shut down the conversation and not to belittle the other side. What do you make of this? We're both on the wrong side of it, but you tell me what you think.
Well, I'm definitely on the wrong side of it. It's I watch it with dismay and sorrow and sometimes anger, because I see, and certainly you see this on X and the other social media platforms, where people are just saying anything and using the worst imaginable language to respond. I see it. I mean, I don't post as much as I used to, but I will occasionally post about either a story I've worked on or to congratulate someone on an award they received or something like that. And the response is sometimes I wouldn't repeat it or print it.
Hmm.
It's unspeakable. People will refer back to, they'll say, you blankety blank blank, how dare you blank blank. Um, and just imagine the worst kinds of things that didn't ever used to be out there in the public discourse. But as you know, there are no guardrails on our discourse on social media. People can say anything they want, and I mean facts. You and I were talking about facts a moment ago.
Hmm.
Those are there's no certainly no guardrails there now, and in terms of language, there's no monitoring of that. So I sometimes, I mean, I do feel like an antique. I feel like I represent, the dinosaur generation. Um, and look, I mean, I don't even want to be so prim and proper as I say, you can never use a curse word or never. And yes, by all means, we want people to be authentic and to be themselves. And I can understand why people are, don't, let politeness get in the way of figuring out, how do we solve this problem? But when it comes down to, I mean, where we are now, which is people insulting, showing contempt, and worse for people on the other side, saying they're traitors, they hate America, and then using the language that goes along with that, sexually degrading. Um, it's and I do think women are the subject of this more than men, but I think there's plenty of it dished out to men as well. And I have a feeling this is something, by Robert, that we are not, the genie's out of the bottle. I don't know how
Hmm.
we turn
Hmm.
the clock back on it.
Well, I mean, are you impressed with people or ideas and organizations out there whom you've encountered in your reporting who seem to maybe have a handle on this and perhaps see a way forward, not back, but forward to some kind of civic conversation in America?
Well, what I'm seeing, and this is through my reporting and traveling around the country, is that in many local communities, from Raleigh, North Carolina, to I was just this um, in the last few days, I've been in Pikeville, Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, in the heart of Appalachia, where people are talking about their differences. I mean, pro-Trump voters, pro-Democratic voters, Democratic Party voters, sitting together talking about, can we find some common ground? I've been in Rhode Island. I've seen it in San Bernardino, California. So I know across the country there are efforts to bring people together, to sit down, to listen. At the same time, it is one person at a time, one group at a time. It's not happening on a massive scale. It's certainly not happening here in Washington, D.C., where I live, where I'm sitting as I talk to you right now. When you watch what's going on at the Capitol, at the White House, and around this city, the there's not much sign of people coming together. Uh, Compromise is a dirty word. Nobody wins by seeking common ground, by trying to compromise. You win by beating the other side down. And so you ask about my hope and do I see positive signs? I do.
Hmm.
They're local, and I'm told by people who study this a lot um, that that's where the movement's going to come from, that it's going to be
Hmm.
grassroots, that people across America are going to rise up and object. And it's going to take some time, but it's going to happen.
You know, I wonder these days whether thinking back on the events of the 21st century, which began with a recession that would be greatly overshadowed by a later recession, had 9/11, two very long and I would say largely indecisive wars, and then on top of the Great Recession, the pandemic. There is a large age group in America, many people who have no memories of the way things really used to be when when things were good, because frankly, things have seldom been good in their lives if they came of age in say the late 1990s. or the early 2000s. And I wonder whether the only way we get more positive ideas to infuse our politics is by delivering a better life to people. That is, maybe it's not that we have prospered because we're a democracy, but we remain being a democracy because generally we have prospered and the system has paid off for people. And right now we're at a moment when there are lots of people for whom things have not paid off. It just hasn't checked out. They've been losing.
Things they've not worked out the way people wanted them to. I've
Mhm.
had some conversations just in the last few days, I mentioned in Kentucky, with people whose families were hit hard when the coal mining industry went down. And that's happened over a course of many decades. There have been ups and downs, but by and large, it's been down. And that's left them wondering what kind of future are they going to have, because for many of them, they had to move away. They had to
Yeah.
get out of Appalachia to a city
Yes.
somewhere to find work that would pay. And this is true, we know, with globalization and all the things that you mentioned. So maybe it is the case that we have to wait for economic good times for people to feel better. I also know that the American people are capable of working through the toughest times, whether it's, and I think of, the civil rights movement, and what a hard period American blacks experienced for hundreds of years before that, and still do to many, as we know. And we also know that, same thing about the women's movement. There've been a lot. We've done a lot. We've tried to look at our mistakes and on I'd say multiple scores, and try to do something about them. So we're capable of fixing or trying to fix our problems, but we have to have a will to do that. And I think we need leaders who speak to our better angels, who will lift us up, inspire us, rather than mainly talking about what's wrong with everybody else and what's wrong with whoever was there before, and why we need to get rid of all the people who had a different view. I would think if our leaders speak not just to our better angels, but can inspire us with a vision of the future that is inclusive, that makes room for everybody, and reminds us that we have a responsibility as citizens. We can't.
Yeah.
It's not just give me all the time. We do have a role as citizens to play, to give back. And so I'm not ready to give up, Robert. I
Okay.
think we're capable of turning the corner, but it's going to require a lot of work on the part of a lot of people.
Well, Judy, congratulations again for winning Moment Magazine's Robert S. Greenberger Journalism Award. And thank you for many years. I was going to say television, but oddly, I live in Washington, D.C., where the news hour is carried by the classical music radio station. So for years, it's actually been a radio program in my household, and a very good one. But thanks for all of your work over so many years, and thanks for talking with us today.
Absolutely. Big fan of yours too. Thank you, Robert.
Bye-bye. Thank you.